Access granted.
Tune in, discover, engage, elevate. Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast.
The sound of Arabia.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Joshua Van Alstyne, here on Artifact, exclusively on AlUla FM, the sound of Arabia. Today, we have in the studio with us renowned Saudi artist, Talal Al Zeid. How are you doing, Talal?
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you to the entire crew at AlUla FM. I'm doing very good. Thank you for asking. I'm glad to be here.
If you were to explain, I know Talal Al Zeid, the famous Saudi graffiti artist. I know Talal Al Zeid, the famous, well-known artist who paved the way for the European Renaissance art guy. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the art that's close to us kind of guy. Do you know, the art that we can relate to kind of guy. That's who comes to mind when I'm thinking about Saudi Arabia's public artist. Like, you're not that kind of person who's making billion-dollar art pieces for big museums or like big collectors. You are the people's artist.
That's an interesting way. I never thought of it that way, but you never really focus on how others perceive what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like in your own world, you know, when you're in your studio, you're just like creating the artwork. But it's always interesting because like different people relate to it differently. So I'll give you like one simple example. So quite a few years back, like maybe 11 years ago or so, I did like artworks with found tires. So it's like found like torn and ripped tires like on the sides of the street. And I started like picking them up, collecting them, and I just had them like laying around for a while until like I started like working with them and painting them. And they were exhibited in art fairs. Part of it were purchased by entities such as the government of Abu Dhabi. And then they were displayed back in the days at the Global Competitiveness Forum, where it was with Sagia. And, you know, showcased in a few places. But what is interesting is every time a particular occasion would pop up, different people would relate to that artwork in a different way. So I started off art as a graffiti artist initially. And so what that means, for me at least, is that I'm very, you know, comfortable with working on different surfaces. Of course, I do prefer canvas as a main medium.
What is graffiti for those people who don't know art that well? What is graffiti?
So graffiti is like an art form. I think the best way to describe it is to actually describe it by its actual definition, because, you know, over the years that it has evolved. So, but basically what graffiti is, it's just one of the four main elements of the hip hop culture. So if you break hip hop down, it'll come down to like MCing, DJing, breakdancing, and then you have graffiti art. And so it was initiated in the 70s back in New York, and eventually it spread all over the world. Aside from it being like part of the hip hop culture, it truly focuses on the aesthetics of how letters look like, which is why you'll find a lot of graffiti artists, when they pick names to paint, they don't necessarily make sense, right? Because it's a visual aesthetic type of thing. They don't want to have to jeopardize the beauty of how those letters come together just for the sake of giving it a meaning. And I think there's like also a thin line, well, we can get into that at a later stage, between like graffiti, street art, calligraphy, and whatnot. But because that was my background initially, I got used to painting with various surfaces. So I'm not confined only to canvas. And so this is how I reacted to those tires. They were just like found, and I took them and I thought they were interesting material. But it's interesting that you bring it up, because I did hear this previously, where people were telling me this is like, you're basically recycling, being sustainable, which is what I was basically trying to say. And part of the works were also shown at the Sharjah Museum during the Sharjah Biennale a few years ago. And they treated it like as letters, right? Because you can shape them in a letter format. So really everybody looked at it differently. To me, it was just like an idea that I had in my mind, and I just thought like the materials looked interesting aesthetically, and I just wanted to play and work with them. And what I initially did is, if we put them together and formed them in a certain shape, they give what would have been explained as in graffiti as a wild style type of thing. And that's really where I was going with this. But then everyone connected to it in a different way, which I think is cool and interesting.
When we are back on Artifact, we're going to explore how hip-hop culture resonated with Talal and influenced his artistic journey, right here on Artifact.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
Welcome back with the renowned Saudi artist Talal Al Zeid. Talal, tell me, hip-hop culture, which you say graffiti is from, hip-hop culture originated in urban areas around the United States.
Yeah.
How did you, Talal Al Zeid, become the evangelist for this type of culture in Saudi Arabia?
I'll just give you like a quick overview as to how I got into this in the first place. So
It doesn't have to be too quick. This is a podcast.
All right,
Remember,
awesome.
it's a podcast. So.
All right, perfect. So basically, it was around the early 90s, right? And for a reason or another, I really liked the sound of hip hop. It just caught my attention. And at the time, I was living in Austria. And back then, hip hop was still very niche, especially in Europe. It wasn't like the States. So it brought everyone together, regardless of where like you were from, etc. and whatnot. But we all came together under that community. Because of my interest, generally speaking, in drawing and in arts and all that, when I got into it, this is where graffiti really caught my attention more than like anything else. I listen to the music, I enjoy it, but then it's like graffiti is the form that I picked up to, let's say, express what hip hop was. And then shortly afterwards, I moved to Italy, and the graffiti art scene in Italy in the 90s was really like, for anyone who was into graffiti, I think the 90s in Rome was one of the places to be at. And it's naturally what connected me with everyone, right?
So wait, I just want people to realize like the 90s was a complicated political era, and things are really rapidly changing in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. And then Saudi Talal Al Zeid is somehow being affected by US hip hop culture on the Mediterranean Sea. So like, do you see how like, I'm listening to you as an American who also lives in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So really, your story is the poster child of globalism. And so tell us, like, what is it about that hip hop culture that spoke to you, Talal, specifically? Like, what is it about graffiti? What is it about hip hop culture that grabbed you, Talal Al Zeid, that we know today in 2023?
Well, that's interesting because it's just the sound. I think it's the flow, the sound, and it's actually the entire lifestyle as a whole, right? So when you say hip hop, especially back then, it obviously evolved from when it started to where it is today. But back then it was a different era. So it was like the baggies, like the hoodies, the graffiti. People were breakdancing in the street. You remember, this is the 90s, right? So there were boom boxes. So we would like go and hang out in places, and people bring their boom boxes, and people would freestyle. So that's really what the scene was like. This is where I constantly hung out, and I was always surrounded by those people. And it's just that the areas where we were, there was like a lot of graffiti artwork around, and I was like, man, this looks really awesome. And I was already into like drawing and whatnot, and so for me it was like, I want to paint, I want to do this. Those letters look awesome, and that's how I got into it. And then obviously the evolution of my expansion and interest in various art forms accumulated.
But graffiti is kind of an ancient thing, and maybe not so ironically, you got in touch with graffiti in Rome. Rome is very ancient, but in AlUla, we also have some rock inscriptions that are hundreds and thousands of years old, and that was their ancient form of graffiti. No, yes, you're the artist. Some historians are calling it ancient graffiti. So what do you think?
If you look at the word graffito, which is a Latin word, it basically tells you that it means like engravings on the walls. And obviously that's something that was like way back. So yeah, I guess it was always there. It just was there in a different form.
Maybe you brought it full circle.
Maybe
it was done in northwestern Arabia at one time, moved around the Mediterranean, and then you in the 90s are somewhere in the Mediterranean, and then you brought it back to Saudi Arabia with some Western influence, but also your own influence, Talal.
Yeah, I'm going to start using that. I like that.
I'm telling you. With Talal, okay, tell me, when you got into graffiti, what was that like? So what did you do? Like pick up a spray can and just start like spraying down your mom's kitchen, or was it like the school, or what was it?
Well, at first, I think it was like you said, I picked up a spray can, and we would like go and paint, and like the thing is, back then it was still not really recognized as an art form. And by the way, I don't do graffiti today. I just want to, not for people to know. So it's like developed.
But that's the perfect cover. So if we see graffiti art, we all know it wasn't Talal Al Zeid because he said publicly it wasn't him. So
Yeah, no,
way to cover your tracks, Talal.
It's something I did back in the days, right? But the thing about it is, when I first started it, it was still not really recognized as an art form. So it was still looked down at, to be honest with you. And simply because of the birth of graffiti and how it came to be and where it, came from originally, and etc. But I think I was lucky. I'll tell you why I was lucky. I had a teacher. He came up to me and he started encouraging me to continue this. And I told him, I was like, I had another teacher that told me that this is not art. And he said, life evolves. You can't just say that this is not art. He said, it's not art today, but it may be art to a lot of people. And my teacher passed away a few years back, but he was right. You fast forward if 10 years later after we've had that dialogue and it's an art form, you see it in galleries, you see it in museums. A lot of the graffiti artists from back then continued. So yeah.
Stay tuned. Our discussion on Talal's artistic evolution and the factors that led him to explore new avenues of creative expression.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we are back with renowned Saudi artist Talal Al Zeid. So do you think you left the world of graffiti, or did you segue into something else? Was it based on some life circumstances, or was it a situation where you just weren't interested anymore?
Look, I'm actually not going to even use the word teacher. He was really my mentor, because even after I finished from school, he still mentored me. And basically what he did is he opened up my eyes to the art world, right? And again, I know I keep referencing the 90s, but I just want to highlight, because it wasn't like today. So we didn't really have, for quite some time, there was no internet. There was no social media, none of that. So the way we kept consuming art or learning about art was either through visiting galleries, museums, or picking up books. That's as simple as it was. And so in my case, he understood where I was as an artist and where I was heading. And so what I liked about him as a mentor, he really started getting me to look at art that he believed may interest me simply because of where I was coming from. And I really appreciated that. And I think that's the strength of a mentor. He really invested time to study me. So he came up to me, he was like, do you know Andy Warhol? And I was like, no, I don't know Andy Warhol. And he was like, do you know Basquiat? I was like, no, I don't know Basquiat. I was a teenager, right? I didn't know those guys. And he was like, okay, I'm going to give you a few books, look at them, tell me what you think, and then we can have a conversation. And so that's exactly what happened, right? And then over the course of years, I was still trying to understand them, right? And then eventually, I think, and this is the addition to what I was doing, it was the School of New York, which is known as the abstract expressionism movement. And this is something that came up around the 1940s.
Yes.
When I looked at the different art forms, there's the abstract movement, there's minimal art, there's pop art and whatnot. So it's the abstract expressionist movement that really got my attention. For a reason or another. And
what is that though, Talal?
So it's a movement that came up in the 40s in New York, and this is why they call it, that's why, AKA, it's also known as the School of New York, but it's about the movements. There's a lot of action painting, so there's a lot of energy and movement in abstract expressionism. Not necessarily all the way, right? It's a little bit, it's complicated in the sense, its definition says one thing, but when you really deep dive into it, you start saying, okay, if that's the definition, then why are we seeing stuff?
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of art, right? Which is that's the whole reason why, it's easy to define, it wouldn't be art anymore. So it would defeat the purpose.
To shed some light on what abstract expressionism is, you have artists like Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, Franz Klein. Those are just a few names. You got Cy Twombly. But those are the types of artists that really made an impact on me. And that's the movement that really got my attention.
Okay, but why did that get your attention? What is it specifically? Is it your attraction to the action, as you mentioned, or what is it exactly? Is it the colors?
Personally, I think there is a correlation between abstract expressionism and graffiti in some way, right? In the sense, if you take a very close look at Jackson Pollock or Cy Twombly's paintings, and let's take Cy Twombly as a good example, because Cy Twombly, if you see how they define his artwork, you may have come across various articles, etc., where they specifically say it's graffiti-like. So keeping in mind, this is before graffiti, right?
So it was a natural segue kind of for you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why it was easy for me to get attracted to that particular art movement. And then it became a little bit confusing for me, right?
Yes.
So it's like you got graffiti art, you got abstract expressionism.
Which is being called somewhat graffiti-like.
Twombly particularly, because the way he executed his paintings, it's strange because he's done this before graffiti came out, right? So
this is one of those cycles, again, like we were talking about graffiti being part of the ancient world, and it went around the world and came back. When we are back on Artifact, we're going to hear Talal's invaluable insights and uncover the deeper meaning behind Talal's art and the feelings he hopes to evoke in his audience. Don't go anywhere.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we're back with Talal. Talal, tell me, when it comes to your, if art is the ultimate form of expression, right? What are you trying to express as an artist? And what are the kind of things that you feel like people should feel through your art?
All right. So I think that question has evolved as far as an answer for me as the years go along. So at the very beginning, I think it was just something that as a teenager, you just got attracted to, the whole graffiti movement type of thing. And so, that stuff was fun. But then with the abstract expressionism movement coming in, for me at least, I think it was a period where I was really trying to express everything that I personally have gone through as a journey, because there are really little bits and pieces of like here and there, right? I was immersed into hip hop, and then I got interested in another art form and then whatnot. So for me, it was like a collective type of thing. And I just wanted to kind of express that, right?
So you see yourself as a combination of those artistic expressions. Like even your life is reflecting that artistic expression.
Because that is what I lived, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to recreate a story or trying to make something up. I'm just this is where I'm coming from. Everything in my artwork today, although I personally tend to see that it's moving more towards non-figurative as we're speaking. Figurative, basically, right now, I've been focusing a lot. I've been doing a lot of portraits.
Oh, okay.
And look, it's very tricky because when you say portraits and then abstract expressionism, it almost doesn't really go hand in hand. But let me tell you how I looked at it. So yes, there is a portrait. You are looking at a face. However, the way I execute the painting technique-wise is completely in an abstract expressionist format. If I decided to cover parts and pieces of that painting where you wouldn't see the portrait anymore, you would 100% label it as an abstract expressionist painting, no matter what. Mm-hmm. But then when you start seeing the way I do the portraits, this is when you start like saying, okay, it's abstract expressionism, but there's like graffiti, so it's like a little bit of an urban type of art. Recently, when I look at my artwork, and this is what I was saying earlier, it's like it seems like it's becoming more and more abstract, and I guess this is something that just happens organically as you evolve.
Talal, I was going to ask you, when you're visualizing or when you're imagining or fantasizing about the work, does it ever come out exactly the way you had imagined it?
That's interesting, because I would say sometimes yes, sometimes, but in some cases no, it's not the case. The
thing is that in itself, also what makes art so appealing to people is that even the artist who is authoring or who is constructing or designing or creating that piece of art, is that even they are not able to fully represent what they had in their hearts and minds.
So now for me, at this current moment, when I look at, for me, when I paint, it's really, I'm just trying to explore what I don't know, right? But it's based on what is influencing me, what I've been through, what I see, what I like, etc. That's the same case with me, and right? So I could look at a painting today that I've personally created, and then if you come 10 years down the line and tell me, how do you feel? I may have a different feeling, right? Look, I'm going to focus maybe a little bit about abstract expressionist, because like I said, you're not looking at a painting where you can see like a house, or you're looking at a particular landscape. So it's like really, it's just colors, expressions, strokes, movements. And I think as you evolve, you're really going to look at it differently. And I think there's also power in color, right? So that color could have different meanings throughout different occasions.
Or depending on how you feel that day, maybe. That hour, that minute.
Yeah.
That is something magical. I think artists are magicians of a sort, magicians of emotions. Coming up on Artifact, we'll explore Talal's stance on the emerging trend of AI-generated art and its implications for the future of art. Stay tuned.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
And we're back with Talal. This is it's unexplainable. It is mysterious in nature. And so when we talk about art being, and this isn't on the approved list, actually, this question came to the last minute from our production manager, Sami Nassour. Yeah.
I think this is where it gets exciting.
Yes, but when it comes to digital art and the world of AI, okay, how do you feel about AI generated art? And Talal, look, I don't want an answer that's going to be so nice to the ears of either pro techno people or pro art is human people. I want really, how does Talal Al Zeid feel about this?
I'll tell you. So this is how I look at it, right? If you go back in time, like, when I was doing graffiti, it was not considered an art form. Nobody took it seriously. Nobody looked at it. Nobody really cared about it. Today, it's a completely different story. We don't know. I think right now we're going through the unknown, because what that may look like in the future, we don't. So, okay, I know that NFTs have come out, right? And I've heard mixed answers around them. We might not know how that could potentially influence or have an impact on anything in the future. But we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know. I think we're at the stage where it's just like pure assumptions to a certain extent, maybe, right?
I love the humility of I don't know, right? Like, this is what Socrates said is the only reason why I know I'm the smartest person here is because I'm the only one who knows that he doesn't know. But seriously, how do you feel about AI art?
Look, I think if you brought like the old masters in art, right? Like from the early 1900s, and you told them what you think about art today, who knows?
Of course, I understand what you're saying.
They're probably like, what's going on here?
Yes.
Right? But see, that's the thing. Everything in life has to evolve eventually. But I'll tell you personally, my personal experience when it comes to AI art. So I was one of the artists that participated in the Saudi pavilion at Expo 2020 Dubai.
Congratulations. That's a big feat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it was really a very one-of-a-kind experience, to be very honest with you. But I'll tell you the interesting part, for me at least particularly. So for my particular part, for that immersive experience, a lot was happening at the pavilion. But I'm just going to focus on what we did, right? So basically, the way it was divided, there was the past, the present, and then the future, right? And so myself, with a group of 4 other artists, we were looking after the future part. And the artwork was titled Vision. So that was the name of the artwork. And what it was really was an immersive experience. So it's like, as you walked, the floors would like interact with you. If you tried to come near the walls and try to touch them, they would interact with you. And there was like this huge globe sphere that's like in the center of the room, move back and forth with it. And so to most people, this is a digital art, right? And it is the way it was executed. But I'm glad you asked that question, because I think it's the process here is interesting. In my particular case, for my part, which is, by the way, just seconds, right? So your eyes just see it real quick. The guys who did the programming did an amazing job. I'm not a digital person, so I don't know how they did it. I don't know what they did, but whatever, they did an amazing job. But for me, it was 3 paintings on canvas. So I actually painted 3 canvases. And the way I was going about it, I was like, do a little bit, then take a picture, then do a little bit, take another picture. So what happened is you had like an evolution of how the painting was created, but it's so smooth that your eyes cannot even recognize that. I don't know what they did. Even when I was looking at it, I was like, if I haven't done that personally, there's no way I would have thought that's acrylic that I'm looking at on canvas. There's no way I would even believe it, maybe. But it's just that the way they made it like transition is really crazy.
So the way I'm understanding what you're saying, perhaps your response, Talal, was not trying to avoid answering the question, and you really did give us a true artistic response to a question about how people should or might feel about AI and its role in quote-unquote art in the future.
Yeah. Look, one good example is also the Van Gogh experience, right? And it basically traveled the world. And I think what is interesting about those things is also because it may connect to an audience that is not necessarily an art audience. And that kind of like is almost like an invitation to people that don't know what art is or don't understand what art is. And it's like and you get those people in, and then maybe a certain percentage may like explore art and start getting interested in art a little bit more. So yeah.
When we get back to Artifact, we'll discuss Talal's insights into the evolving landscape of graffiti art and its potential for continued relevance. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere.
Artifact with Joshua on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.
So what about our last question for today's podcast, Talal? We've been so blessed and so lucky and fortunate to have you in our studios today here at AlUla FM, The Sound of Arabia, on our podcast named Artifact. So you talked a lot about your mentor, right?
Yeah.
And the role he played in who you are today and how comfortable and confident you are in your artistic expression. What would you advise anyone looking to get into graffiti art today in 2023? If I came up to you as an art student and I said to you, Professor Talal, would you give me some advice on being an artist? You would naturally say, what I'm imagining every artist would say is, follow your heart. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Let the art flow through you onto whatever medium you're working in. Just you be you. Do you know what I'm saying?
I'll tell you what on that note, actually. This is a tip that was given to me, right? And I did it. And this is very important. Go out there, try out every possible medium, right? And do it for a while. And I think that's the tip that helped me a lot. So let me give you just an example. I took photography. And this is back when it was the film days, before the digital cameras. And I had to develop them. So that was the whole point of the course, right? And I did color photography for 1 entire year. I did it from A to Z. And then I did an entire year of black and white photography. And see, that was the tip that was given to me. And I remember at the time, I looked at my mentor, I was like, I'm not interested in photography. And he's like, you don't know if you're interested in photography. And then when I did it, right, he came to me and he said, so what did you think? I was like, I don't think it's my medium. He said, good. He said, A, now you know. B, you may actually change your mind as you get older. He said, so I think I did black and white first, actually. I think that's how it was. And then he was like, now go do color. I was like, I just told you that. He's like, no, go do color. He's like, you don't know. You've done black and white. You haven't done color. He said, go do color. And then after that, I took a course for silk screening for 6 months, right?
What's that?
So you have like different layers that make up the artwork and you put them, and then there's one color per each part of that particular painting. And see, the thing is, I did it for 6 months. So the things were pretty intense. Some mediums were not truly my favorite because for me, it's the process of creating the painting. I think the joy is in the making of the painting while you're holding the brush, you're trying to have, your paint go into different directions, etc. And I think those are the things that truly helped me, right? It's because I went through that process, I confidently say, this is my main medium because I've tried everything and I've tried everything for a very long period, considering you have short courses that last like a day, 2 or 3 or 5.
What about graffiti? If I'm interested, is this a pursuit worth?
Yeah. I'll tell you why I say yes. Because today you have access to a lot of mediums. Back in the days, you didn't have access to this stuff, right? There was nobody could transfer this knowledge to you. I mean, you had to go figure it out yourself. Today, you have like books, you've got courses, you have like institutes, etc. that teach you that stuff. So today, you can basically learn in 1 year what other people would have learned in 3-4 years back in the days. So, you have the tools, you have the resources. It's an accepted art form today versus back then, which makes it even easier for you to actually make a career out of it, go out, get projects and enjoy it. So I think it's definitely a good time for people to get into it.
So Talal, thank you so much for being with us today in the studio.
Thank you, guys.
We want to know, if we're interested in getting in touch with you, where can we find you?
All right. I only have Instagram right now on social media. That's the most active one. So it's basically my whole name, one word, TALALZEID. Yeah, that's where I post everything. So I just gave a talk a few days ago, but that's where I post the stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Everyone, that was Talal Al Zeid, very well known and renowned Saudi artist who entered the art scene through graffiti. And he told us all about why he was influenced by graffiti and then moved into other art forms, what he thinks about AI art. He also told us about hip-hop and how that influenced his life. And we hope to hear more from Mr. Talal. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Josh. And I want to thank the entire crew, AlUla FM. Really, it's been amazing. That's an honor, really. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Talal, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Artifact.
Thanks.
Subscribe for more great content right here on AlUla FM podcast. The sound of Arabia.